Welcome, wanderers of the shadowed vale, to another descent into the throne of nightmares. I am your host, the keeper of forgotten echoes, and tonight we do not merely listen, we are drawn into the maw of a tale that has slithered through the cracks of history, unseen, unfelt, until now. Imagine, if you dare, the year 1880. Gas lamps flicker like dying stars in the narrow alleys of London, casting elongated shadows that whisper secrets to the cobblestones. The air hangs heavy with the scent of coal, smoke, and river rot. The Thames a sluggish vein pulsing with the city's unspoken sins. It is an age of invention and illusion, where the camera's eye captures not just the living, but the lingering dead, frozen in silver nitrate, their souls etched into glass plates that never quite forget. But tonight's nightmare is no mere ghost story, no spectral apparition rattling chains in a draughty manner. It is a portrait, a single, cursed image that has haunted attics and forgotten albums for over a century. They call it the Whitaker Illusion. A father, seated in stiff-backed dignity, his face a mask of stoic grief, his hands folded neatly in his lap, and there, resting upon those hands, as if proffered like a grotesque offering at some pagan altar, the severed head of his daughter. Her eyes, wide and glassy, stare out from the frame with an innocence that defies the horror. Her golden curls cascade over pallid cheeks, lips parted in a silent plea. No blood mars the scene, no arterial spray, no ragged wound, just the head nestled like a cherished doll, while the father's gaze meets the lens with a serenity that chills the marrow. How does one behold such a thing without the soul recoiling? Was it a murder, captured in the unflinching gaze of early photography? A macabre memorial to a child's untimely end? Or something far more insidious, an illusion woven from grief's dark threads? A trick of light and shadow that peeled back the veil between the rational world and the abyss? Whispers in antiquarian circles claim the image was never meant for mortal eyes. That Elias Whitaker, the father in question, commissioned it not from vanity, but from desperation. A man of means, a clockmaker by trade, whose life ticked inexorably toward midnight when his only daughter, little Clara, slipped from this world at the tender age of 9. Picture it, Elias, broad-shouldered and weathered by the ceaseless grind of gears and escapements, returning home each evening to the narrow terraced house on Blackfriars Road. The parlor, once alive with Clara's laughter, high and tinkling like the chimes of his finest Mantel clock, now echoes with silence. Her mother, long departed in childbirth, leaves Elias adrift in a sea of solitude, clutching at the frayed edges of memory. And then the photograph, taken in the dim glow of a studio lantern by a photographer whose name has dissolved into obscurity. Some say it was one Josiah Grimshaw, a practitioner of the occult, tin darts of the lens. The image arrived in a plain mahogany case, its velvet lining stained with what might have been tears, or something darker. But pause here, dear listener, in the threshold of this tale. Feel the weight of it settling upon your chest, like the fog that rolls in from the river, thick and unyielding. For the Whitaker Illusion is no relic of idle curiosity. It is a mirror held to the human heart's most profane chamber, the place where love curdles into obsession, where loss births monstrosities that no scalpel can excise. As we journey deeper, you will walk the gaslit streets with Elias, taste the bitter laudanum on his tongue, hear the phantom patter of Clara's footsteps on the stairs. You will uncover the whispers of spiritualist séances, the flicker of double exposures that blurred the line between life and the great beyond. And at the heart of it all, that head, severed not by blade, but by the cruelest cut of all time itself. Why does this image endure, buried in yellowed ledgers and dusty society pages, surfacing only in nightmares? Because it asks us to confront the illusion we all cling to, that death is an end rather than a doorway, that the ones we lose do not linger, watching, waiting, their forms twisted by our unslackable longing. Elias Whitaker believed he could capture Clara forever, frame her essence in the unblinking eye of the camera. But what if the camera captured something else? Something that gazed back. Let the fog thicken around you now. Let the distant toll of Big Ben mark not the hour, but the unraveling of sanity. We begin in the autumn of 1879, when the first shadows fell upon the Whitaker household. Elias, a man of precise mechanisms, found his world unspooling thread by thread. Clara's cough had started as a mere winter rattle, dismissed by the apothecary as a trifle, sir, nothing a tincture won't mend. But by spring, it had deepened into a rasp that echoed through the house like the grinding of rusted cogs. Elias watched, helpless, as her cheeks hollowed, her once vibrant eyes dulled to the luster of polished marble. He pawned heirloom watches to summon physicians from Harley Street. Quacks, all, with their leeches and elixirs that only hastened the pallor. Nights blurred into fevered vigils. Elias would sit by her bedside, the room heavy with the scent of camphor and wilting roses, reading from Grimm's fairy tales until his voice cracked. And the little girl with the golden hair, he'd murmur, she danced through the woods, untouched by thorn or beast. Clara would smile then, her small hand in his, whispering, "Papa, will I dance forever?" He promised her the stars, the moon, the endless tick of eternity. But promises, like clock springs, can snap without warning. By summer's end, the end came, not with thunder, but a sigh of final, shuddering breath that left the air unnaturally still. Elias held her then, her body light as a bird's wing, and in that moment, something fractured within him, not grief, not yet, but a void, vast and echoing, that demanded filling. The funeral was a blur of black creep and murmuring mourners, distant cousins who eyed the Whitaker silver with avarice. Elias buried her in Highgate Cemetery, beneath a stone etched with cherubs and the words, "Our little clockwork angel." But the grave was no solace. At home her room remained untouched, the doll house with its tiny inhabitants frozen in eternal play, the music box that warbled a fractured lullaby when wound too tight. It was then that Elias turned to the photographers. In an era where the camera was both miracle and mourner, post-mortem portraits had become de rigueur for the bereaved. Families posed with their departed, propping lids with wire, painting cheeks with rouge to mimic the blush of life. But Elias sought more. He craved not preservation, but communion. Rumors swirled in the taverns of Fleet Street, studios where spirit photographers summoned the dead through double exposures, where ectoplasm bloomed like spectral flowers on the plate. Grimshaw's establishment, tucked in a fog, choked muse off Drury Lane, promised images beyond the veil. It was there, under the watchful eye of a brass-bound lens, that the illusion was born. As the plate developed in the crimson glow of the darkroom, Elias waited, heart hammering like a pendulum. And when the image emerged, Clara's head, severed yet serene, cradled in his lap, he wept not for horror, but for revelation. "She is with me," he whispered to the empty room, "forever." But the shadows in the corners stirred, for in capturing the illusion, had he not invited the nightmare to sit at his table? Breathe deeply now, listener. Feel the chill draft at your neck, the prickle of unseen eyes. This is but the threshold. The true unraveling awaits, the descent into Elias's fractured mind, the secrets etched in silver and shadow. Stay with me. The throne calls. The nightmare hungers. The fog clung to Blackfriars Road like a shroud reluctant to lift, even as the first pallid rays of dawn pierced the gloom. It was October 15th, 1879, and Elias Whitaker stepped from his workshop, the door's bell jangling a discordant farewell. At 47, he was a man built for endurance, tall, with the broad hands of one who wrestled time itself into submission. His frock coat, threadbare at the cuffs, hung loose on shoulders once squared against the world's indifference. The air tasted of soot and the faint, metallic tang of the Thames, but beneath it lingered something fouler, the acrid bite of fear. Elias's workshop occupied the ground floor of number 47, a narrow edifice squeezed between a pawnbroker's den of tarnished dreams and a gin palace where sailors drowned their ghosts. Inside, the air hummed with the symphony of his craft, ticking escapements, whirring mainsprings, the soft click of pinions meshing in perfect harmony. Clocks of every stripe adorned the walls, ornate grandfather timepieces with moon phase dials that gazed down like judgmental eyes. Pocket watches slim as whispered sins, even a curious chronometer he'd salvaged from a wrecked East Indiaman, its brass scarred by salt and storm. Elias was no mere repairer. He was a custodian of moments, a weaver of the invisible threads that bound past to future. "Time is the great equalizer," he'd tell Clara, his voice a gravelly rumble softened by paternal pride. "It spares no one, but in its gears we find our measure." Clara. The name alone was a talisman against the encroaching chill. She was his dawn, his sole luminescence in a life of measured monotony. Born in the sweltering heat of '70, when the Franco-Prussian War's echoes still rattled Europe's teacups, she had arrived with a cry that pierced the workshop's din like a cuckoo's call. Her mother, poor Eliza, had bartered her life for the child's, hemorrhaging away on sweat, soaked sheets while Elias paced the landing, fists clenched against fate's indifference. From that day, Clara was his world, his apprentice in whimsy, perched on a stool amid the gears, her tiny fingers tracing the arc of a balance wheel. "Papa," she'd giggle, her voice a cascade of silver bells, "does time ever get tired? Does it sleep like me?" He'd chuckle then, lifting her onto his knee, the scent of her, lavender soap and sun-warmed curls, banishing the workshop's oil and dust. "Time never sleeps, love, but it dreams," of little girls who dance through its hours. Those evenings, after the last customer departed, they would wind the clocks together, her hand guiding his on the key, turning back the hands to savor the stolen moments. The house above was modest, a parlor with horsehair settee and a hearth that roared against winter's bite, a kitchen where Eliza's ghost lingered in the scent of rosemary scones, and Clara's room at the top, papered in forget me, not blue, where a canopy bed cradled her like a coracle on gentler seas. But the cough came unbidden, a thief in the night. It began in early autumn, a dry hack that interrupted her games with the neighbor's mongrel patch. Elias dismissed it at first. London's fogs were rife with such maladies, and a posset of honey and lemon soon set her right. Yet as leaves turned to flame and fell, the cough deepened, rooting in her chest like some subterranean worm. Sleepless nights followed, Elias rising from his truckle bed to light the stub of candle, its flame guttering in draughts that slithered under the eaves. He'd bundle her in shawls, brew teas from smuggled Indian leaves that promised miracles, but her fever rose like the Thames in flood, her skin hot and slick as oiled silk. The physicians arrived in a parade of starched collars and skepticism. Dr. Hargrove, with his pince, nez and pouch of calomel, bled her with lancets that left her arms bruised as autumn plums. "Consumption's shadow, Mr. Whitaker," he pronounced, his voice clipped as shears. "Rest, fresh air, though in this metropolis, that's a tall order." Elias nodded, jaw set like forged iron, and sent for specialists from the Royal College. They poked and prodded, prescribed digitalis that made her heart flutter like a trapped bird, and opiates that plunged her into dream-haunted stupors. Clara, ever the brave sprite, bore it with wide-eyed wonder. "Papa? Do the doctors chase the cough away with their magic sticks?" she'd ask, her breath a ragged whisper. He'd force a smile, stroking her fevered brow. "I love. And when they fail, Papa's clocks will tick it into oblivion." Winter clamped down like a vice. Snow muffled the city's clamor, turning Blackfriars into a spectral labyrinth of white, draped spires and iron-laced silence. Elias shuttered the workshop, ignoring the bailiff's knocks, his world contracting to the four walls of Clara's chamber. The room, once a bower of play, became a sepulchre, the air thick with the medicinal reek of vinegar and vinegar of squills, the walls seeming to lean inward under the weight of unspoken dread. He'd read to her by firelight, tales of enchanted forests where children outwitted witches, of clockwork kingdoms where time bent to the will of the pure-hearted. Her favorites were the brothers Grimm, their pages dog-eared from countless recitals, Hansel and Gretel, with its oven of retribution, the juniper tree, a grim fancy of a stepmother's pie and a boy's vengeful bird song. One such night, as sleet lashed the panes like accusatory fingers, Clara stirred from her laudanum doze. Her eyes, once the blue of delphinium skies, were clouded, rimmed with the bruised purple of exhaustion. "Papa," she murmured, her voice a threadbare veil. "I'm afraid the cough is a monster. It lives in my lungs, gnawing at the strings that hold me to you." Elias's throat tightened, a vise of grief he dared not acknowledge. He gathered her close, her body frail as a sparrow's, the heat of her fever seeping through his shirt like a brand. "Hush now, my tick-tock girl. Monsters fear the light, and Papa's light will burn it out." He wound the bedside clock then, a simple brass alarm with chimes like fairy bells, setting it to strike the hour of her birth. As it tolled, soft and silvery, she smiled, a fleeting bloom in the wasteland of her face. "Promise you'll always hear my chimes, Papa, even when I'm dancing with the angels." The promise lodged in his chest like a splintered gear. He nodded, tears carving salty paths through the stubble of his cheeks. "Every chime, Clara. Every one." Outside, the wind howled a dirge, rattling the window frames as if demanding entry. Elias barred the door, but shadows have no need of hinges. They seep through keyholes, coil in corners, wait for the weak to falter. Spring arrived tardy, a coquette in greening finery, but brought no renewal to number 47. Clara rallied briefly, color returning to her lips like dawn to the horizon, her laughter a fragile echo in the parlor. Elias ventured out, bartering repaired timepieces for provisions, the streets alive with hawkers' cries and the clatter of omnibuses. But the respite was illusion, a cruel jest of the fates. By May, the cough returned threefold, racking her frame until blood flecked her handkerchiefs like crimson petals. Elias scoured the docks for exotic cures, Peruvian bark, Chinese ginseng, his pockets emptying faster than an hourglass. Desperation bred folly. He consulted a Cornish wise woman, her hut reeking of herbs and incantation, who pressed a charm of raven's bone into his palm. "Bind it to the child's wrist," she croaked, eyes milky as moonstone. "It wards the reaper's scythe." He did, tying it with trembling fingers, but the reaper, it seemed, cared little for such trinkets. June's solstice sun beat down mercilessly, turning the city into a furnace of sweat and despair. Clara's bed became her prison, the canopy a veil between her and the mocking world beyond. Elias, gaunt from skipped meals, haunted the apothecary shops, haggling for morphine drops that dulled the pain but blurred her gaze to vacancy. Nights devolved into rituals. He'd bathe her forehead with rosewater, sing half-remembered lullabies from his Yorkshire youth. "Husha, bye, baby," on the tree-top, his baritone cracking on the high notes. The clocks below ticked in counterpoint, a mechanical heartbeat mocking his impotence. It was on a sweltering eve, the air stagnant as a grave's breath, that the end whispered its arrival. Clara lay still, her chest rising in shallow, erratic waves, the raven's charm dangling like a noose from her wrist. Elias sat vigil, the room lit by a single argand lamp that cast elongated shadows, fingers of darkness clawing at the bedposts. "Papa?" she breathed, her voice a moth's wing against glass.
"The monster, it's winning."
"But don't be sad. I'll be your little ghost, winding your clocks when you sleep." He choked on a sob, clutching her hand, the bones fine as porcelain beneath his colluses. "No ghosts, Clara, only forever, Papa's forever." Her eyes fluttered shut, the rise and fall ceasing with a finality that sucked the air from the room. The lamp flickered as if in mourning, and Elias wailed, a primal keen that shook the rafters, summoning neighbors to pound on the walls with broom handles. He held her then, rocking the lifeless form, the warmth ebbing like sand through fingers. Dawn crept in, grey and indifferent, illuminating the tableau. Father and daughter entwined in eternal stasis, the clocks below striking 6 in mocking unison. The days that followed were a fog of formality. The undertaker arrived with his waxed mustache and ledger of coffins, selecting rosewood with silver fittings, befitting a cherub. "Sir." Elias nodded numbly, signing away guineas he no longer possessed. Clara's body lay in state in the parlor, dressed in white muslin, a coronet of wax flowers crowning her brow. Mourners filed through, shopkeepers with condolences as crisp as their aprons, aunts with veiled hats dripping crocodile tears. Elias stood apart, a sentinel at the coffin's edge, his eyes fixed on her face as serene now, the pain erased, but the absence a chasm that swallowed light. Burial came on a rain-lashed afternoon, Highgate's paths slick with mud that clung like accusations. The vicar intoned of resurrection and reward, his words hollow as the grave's echo. Elias lowered the casket himself, ropes biting into palms, already scarred by tools, and as earth thudded upon wood, something within him snapped, not with finality, but with fracture. Returning home, the house gaped empty, Clara's room a reliquary of loss. Her pinafore draped over the chair, a half-finished sketch of a clockwork bird on the desk. He wandered its confines, touching relics, the music box wound to silence, the dollhouse, its inhabitants staring with glass-eyed accusation. Grief, that insidious artisan, began its work. Elias reopened the workshop, but his hands trembled on the screwdrivers, gears slipping from numbed fingers. Customers complained of timepieces that ran erratically, as if haunted by erratic hearts. Nights brought phantoms' footsteps on the stairs, a child's giggle swallowed by wind. Laudanum became his companion, its poppy embrace blurring edges, inviting dreams where Clara danced, whole and hale, only to dissolve into mist at his touch. In the depths of such reveries an idea crystallized, not born of reason, but of the void's demand. If time could be captured in brass and steel, why not her? Why not eternity in emulsion? It was Widow Hargreaves, the baker's crone next door, who planted the seed. Over tea laced with sympathy, she spoke of spirit cabinets and photographic seances. They say the camera steals the soul, Mr. Whitaker. But for the right price, it can summon it back. Her words lingered, a burr in his mind. He scoured the Times for advertisements, portraits of the departed, true to life and beyond. One caught his eye, J. Grimshaw, photographic artist, Drury Lane Muse, specialties in post-mortem and ethereal exposures. Discretion assured. The appointment was set for a fortnight hence, the 12th of August, 1880. Elias prepared meticulously, as if for a coronation rather than a conjuring. He exhumed Clara's favorite dress, a sprigged cotton with lace at the collar, and laid it upon the bed, the fabric whispering against the sheets. From the attic, he retrieved Elisa's old locket, its clasp sprung, containing a miniature of the three of them, a family intact, smiling against the daguerreotype's glare. As midnight tolled, he sat in the parlor, the air thick with the scent of developing chemicals he'd procured from a Fleet Street supplier. Silver nitrate, potassium cyanide, the alchemist's brew that birthed images from darkness. Dawn found him resolute, the locket chained about his neck like a talisman. The streets teemed with life, costermongers hawking wilted fruit, flower girls with blooms bruised as Clara's cheeks. But Elias moved through them as a spectre, his destination the fog-veiled mews where Grimshaw's studio lurked. The building was unassuming, a bow-fronted shop with a sign faded to illegibility, windows curtained in black velvet. A bell tinkled as he entered, admitting him to a chamber redolent of ether and fixative, shelves lined with jars of glass plates like pickled specimens. Grimshaw himself was a wisp of a man, late 50s, with mutton chops streaked grey and eyes sharp as lens pins. "Mr. Whitaker," he greeted, voice smooth as oiled gears, "I've heard of your loss, a tragedy beyond words. How may the lens serve?" Elias unburdened himself haltingly, the cough, the grave, the gnawing void. He spoke of capturing Clara, not as corpse, but as essence, something intimate. "As if she's still with me, beside me." Grimshaw nodded, steepling fingers scarred by acid burns. "Ah, the illusion of proximity. We can achieve that. A composite, perhaps, your form, her likeness superimposed. Or, for the bold, a physical staging. The head isolated as in the old tricks of the trade." Elias's pulse quickened. The old tricks. He'd read of them in penny dreadfuls, Victorian fads where sitters appeared decapitated, heads balanced on platters or cradled like trophies, achieved through mirrors and multiple exposures. Morbid amusements for the idle rich, but for him a path to absolution. "Show me," he rasped. Grimshaw led him to the studio proper, a cavernous loft draped in black calico, illuminated by a bank of parabolic mirrors that funneled daylight like captured lightning. The camera loomed, a mahogany behemoth on tripod legs, its lens a cyclopean eye that seemed to appraise. The session began innocuously. Elias posed on a velvet, draped fainting couch, hands folded, expression schooled to paternal calm. Grimshaw adjusted the focus, the shutters click a guillotine's whisper. Then came the head, not Clara's, God forbid, but a mannequin's porcelain and eerily childlike, swathed in a wig of golden curls procured from a theatrical supplier. Grimshaw positioned it in Elias's lap, tilting the chin to mimic repose, dusting the cheeks with rice powder for that porcelain sheen. Imagine her, sir. Pour your grief into the glass. The plate will hold it true. Snaps followed. Dozens, the air growing thick with flash powder's acrid bloom. Elias stared into the void of the lens, willing Clara's features onto the dummy her button nose, the dimple in her left cheek, the way her lashes fanned like fern fronds. Sweat beaded his brow, the room's heat oppressive, shadows pooling in corners like spilled ink. Between exposures, Grimshaw murmured of techniques, double printing, where negatives overlaid to birth chimeras, spirit wrapping, where mediums channeled the dead to guide the hand. The veil thins in the darkroom, Mr. Whitaker. Sometimes they pose themselves. As the light waned, Elias felt a shift, a prickling at the nape, as if fingers brushed his soul. The dummy's eyes, glass marbles painted hazel, seemed to flicker. Or was it the laudanum's haze? Grimshaw called a halt, retreating to develop the plates. Elias waited in the antechamber, the tick of his pocket watch a metronome to mounting dread. Hours passed. The city outside devolved into gaslit twilight, hawkers' cries fading to murmurs. At last, Grimshaw emerged, face ashen, bearing a single print, still damp, mounted on cardstock. Behold, he breathed, extending it like a holy relic. Elias took it, hands steady despite the tremor in his limbs. There she was, Clara, her head severed clean at the neck, no stump or gore, resting in his lap as if asleep upon his knee. Her eyes gazed up, not at him, but through him into infinities unseen. The curls framed a face of unearthly peace, lips curved in that half-smile she reserved for their clock, wending rites. Elias's breath hitched. Tears blurred the image to a halo. "It's her," he whispered. "My girl." But as he traced the edge, a shadow caught his eye, a faint outline in the negative space, like a hand extending from the void. Grimshaw cleared his throat. "A trick of the light, sir. Or perhaps not. The cost is 10 guineas, framed in oak." Elias paid without haggling, the coin spilling from his purse like blood from a vein. He departed into the night, the package clutched to his chest, the fog parting before him as if in deference. Homeward, through alleys where prostitutes plied their trade and urchins, begged with hollow eyes, the print burned against his ribs, a talisman, a curse. Number 47 welcomed him with silence, the clock's chorus subdued, as if in awe. He ascended to the parlor, lighting candles that danced shadows across the walls. Unwrapping the image, he propped it on the mantel, beside the silver-framed miniature of Eliza. Their father and daughter reunited, severed yet whole. Elias sank into the armchair, the laudanum vial uncorked, its syrupy promise a siren's call. As oblivion claimed him, he murmured to the empty air, "Welcome home, Clara." But in the witching hour, when moonlight slanted through the grime, streaked panes, a sound pierced the hazed, a soft, rhythmic ticking, not from below but from the portrait itself. And in the glass, did her eyes, did they blink? The days following the portrait's arrival blurred into a tapestry of ritual and unraveling. Elias Whitaker, once a pillar of punctuality, now measured time not by the clocks he mended, but by the glances he stole toward the mantel. The image commanded the parlor, like a sovereign in exile, framed in polished oak, its glass reflecting the hearth's dying embers, casting Clara's face in a perpetual ruddiness of fox life. He spoke to it in the mornings, over porridge gone cold-eye. "Good day, my tick-tock. Did you dream of dancing?" At evenings, as shadows lengthened, he'd recount the day's banalities. The finicky verge of Mr. Aldridge's repeater, the theft of a fob by a light-fingered apprentice, his voice dropping to conspiratorial tones, as if she might reply from the ether. The workshop suffered. Customers dwindled, whispers circulating of the clockmaker gone queer in the head, talking to thin air amid the gears. Elias barely noticed, his hands moving by rote, eyes drifting to the ceiling where footsteps, no echoes, pattered like rain on tin. Sleep eluded him, chased away by visions, Clara's head rolling across Highgate's sword, coming to rest at his boots with a grin, or worse, her form whole, beckoning from the wardrobe's depths, neck a ragged ruin that wept black echo. Laudanum vials multiplied on the sideboard, their amber contents dwindling like hourglass sands, each draught a descent into velvet oblivion, where she was whole, twirling in muslin skirts to the waltz of escapements. Yet the portrait was no mere placebo. Strange phenomena attended it, subtle at first, like the creak of settling timbers. Candles guttered without draught, wax pooling in shapes that evoked tiny hands. The air grew chill in the parlor, frost-etching fern patterns on the window panes even as July sweltered outside. Elias dismissed them as grief's phantoms, but doubt gnawed like rust on a spring. One dawn, rousing from a stupor, he found the locket, Clara's locket, worn thin from her neck, dangling from the frame's hook, though he'd locked it away nights prior. Inside, the miniature photo had altered, Eliza's eyes averted as if in disapproval, and Clara's smile twisted to something sly, knowing. Word spread, as it does in cramped terraces where walls are thin as whispers. Widow Hargreaves knocked with scones and sidelong glances, her Bible clutched like a shield. Mr. Whitaker, that picture, it's unnatural. Draws the eye, don't it? Like them spirit snaps, what took old Mrs. Finch's wits. Elias waved her off, but her words lingered, a burr in his conscience. He sought solace in the Spiritualist Gazette, its pages filled with testimonies of revenants captured on plate, ghosts materializing as orbs of light, departed spouses posing arm in arm with the bereaved. The camera, one article proclaimed, is the soul's daguerreotype, etching the invisible upon the visible. Emboldened, he penned Grimshaw, inquiring of the shadow, hand glimpsed in the negative. The reply arrived postmarked from a Brighton sanatorium. Dear sir, the anomaly is common in ethereal work. A spirit's touch, perhaps your daughter's, guiding the exposure. Burn no sage, embrace the contact. Yours in the veil, J.G. The letter ignited a fervor. Elias delved into occult tomes borrowed from a Charing Cross bookseller. The key to the celestial arcanum, dusty volumes on mesmeric trances and ectoplasmic manifestations. He conducted amateur seances, alone in the parlor, the portrait as a Ouija centerpiece. A tumbler of water served as planchette, his fingers trembling on its rim as he intoned, Clara, my love, speak through the glass. At first, silence, broken only by the hearth's pop. Then, ripples formed, letters spelling P-A-P-A in wavering script. His heart soared, tears blurred the words to affirmation. You're here, he breathed, pressing lips to the frame. Papa's girl. But communion bred escalation. The tappings began, soft at first, mimicking Morse from the mantel, evolving to knocks that rattled the china. Elias rose one midnight to find the dollhouse rearranged, tiny figures clustered around a clock tower. One doll beheaded, its porcelain noggin cradled by a paternal miniature. Terror should have gripped him, but instead, a perverse thrill coursed his veins, like oil to a dry bearing. He wrote Grimshaw again, pleading for another session, more intimate. Show her whole yet bound to me. The photographer's response was, wary illusions have teeth, sir. Proceed with salt circles. Undeterred, Elias prepared, scattering sea salt in thresholds, hanging hawthorn above the door. Folk wards against the unquiet. The second sitting convened under a harvest moon, its light silvering Drury Lane like mercury. Grimshaw's studio felt altered, air heavier, mirrors fogged with unbidden breath. You've stirred something, the photographer muttered, chalking a pentagram on the floorboards. This time, no mannequin. Elias posed as before, but Grimshaw produced a locket-sized plate of Clara, taken in life, her face alight with mischief, and laid it in his lap, the head's image staring up from its confines. Focus, sir. Will her forth. The exposure dragged, minutes stretching to eternities, flash powder blooming like funeral pyres. Elias chanted under breath, come back, tick-tock. Papa's waiting. A wind rose unbidden, snuffing lanterns, plunging the room to moonlight's mercy. When the print emerged, hours later, Grimshaw blanched. By God, the image was perfection. Clara's head, fuller now, cheeks flushed as in fever's peak, nestled seamless in Elias's grasp. But the eyes, those hazel depths, gleamed with animation, pupils dilated as if beholding forbidden truths. And the shadow hand, clear as slender fingers curling from the void, possessive on the neck's invisible seam.
It's her touch.
Elias exulted, snatching the plate. Grimshaw recoiled.
No, sir, that's no spirit's grace. Burn it.
Before it burns you. But Elias fled into the night, the print a live coal against his heart. Home he mounted it beside the first, a diptych of devotion. Phenomenal intensified whispers in the walls, Clara's voice murmuring lullabies at witching hour, the clock synchronizing to her birth minute chiming unbidden. Elias thrived on it, neglecting shop and sustenance, his frame wasting to skeletal elegance. Neighbors shunned number 47, crossing streets to avoid the mad clockmaker's stare. Yet solitude suited him. The house became a temple, the portrait its altar. He ceased laudanum clarity sharpening his mania. We're together, he'd croon, tracing her lips through glass. Severed from the world, but whole in ours. Autumn waned, leaves carpeting the terrace in decay's palette. Elias's dreams turned prophetic Clara, head in hands, leading him through clockwork labyrinths where gears ground souls to dust. Awakening drenched, he'd find the frames askew, as if jostled by tiny tempests. One morn, blood spotted the mantel, his own, from bitten tongue in sleep, but smeared in patterns. A child's scrawl, HUNGRY, dismay flickered, swiftly quenched. Just a dream's echo, he rationalized, wiping it clean. Winter's grip tightened, snow blanketing London in hush. Elias barricaded against it, stoking fires that roared defiance. The portraits warmed unnaturally, glass misting with interior breath. He confided in no one, save a letter to Grimshaw unanswered. Isolation bred delusion. He fancied conversations, her voice piping from the frame-pa. Wind me tight, I'm unwinding. He'd comply, turning an imaginary key at her temple, the house's clocks responding in frenzy. Crisis crested on Christmas Eve, 1880. Carolers' strains filtered through frost-laced panes. God rest ye merry gentlemen. A mockery to his vigil. Elias sat before the diptych, mulled wine steaming untouched, when the air split with a crack. The first frame shattered, glass spider webbing, Clara's image fracturing like a scream. Shards drew blood from his palms as he grasped it, but the head remained intact, eyes locking on his with accusation. What have you done? The voice, not dream but palpable, emanated from the ruin, child high and accusatory. Panic seized him. He lunged for the second print, but hands, not his, pinned his wrists, cold, small, unyielding. In the hearth's glow, shadows coalesced, a form necklace, hovering, golden curls afloat like hallowed serpents.
Papa, why did you cut me free?
Clara's face, projected from the glass, hovered inches from his, breath icy on his cheek. Elias thrashed, screaming denials, but the grip tightened, pulling him toward the flames. Visions assailed the cough as metaphor, his cure. A vivisection of spirit, the camera not captor, but liberator of something feral. Reason fractured. He wrenched free, seizing a poker, smashing both frames in frenzy. Glass exploded, portraits reduced to confetti of emulsion and card. Silence fell, broken only by his sobs. Surveying the wreckage, he saw not destruction, but liberation or damnation. The house stilled, clocks halting mid-tick, as if time itself held breath. Dawn brought clarity's cruel edge. Elias burned the remnants in the grate, watching Clara's eyes curl black, her smile char to ash. He shuttered the workshop for good, selling tools to fund passage to America, New York, where gears turned faster, grief might grind finer. But as the ship steamed from Southampton, fog swallowing England's spires, a locket weighed heavy at his throat. Inside, a sliver of plate, salvaged in madness her eye, singular, watching. Years later, in a Bowery tenement, Elias succumbed. To consumption, they said, the irony not lost on the coroner. His effects? A trunk of timepieces, rusted silent, and a faded print, head intact, cradled eternal. It vanished into auction, resurfacing in 1923 at a Sotheby's sale, labeled the Whitaker Illusion. Bidders recoiled, the gavel fell to an anonymous collector. Where it resides now, who knows? But in quiet hours, when fog rolls thick, listen a child's chime, a father's whisper, forever. To grasp the tendrils of the Whitaker Illusion, We must peer beyond the veil of fiction into the sepia-drenched reality of Victorian England. A epoch where science and superstition danced a macabre quadrille, and the camera emerged not as innocent recorder, but as necromancer's tool. It is 1880, the fin de siècle's shadow lengthening, an era bookended by Darwin's unsettling origin in 1859 and the Jack the Ripper horrors of 1888. Society teetered on progress's precipice, railways snaking like iron veins across the land, telegraphs humming with instantaneous gossip. Yet beneath the bustle lurked a fascination with the occult, a collective shiver at mortality's maw. Queen Victoria, herself a widow since Albert's untimely death in 1861, draped the nation in creep, her seclusion a mirror to the era's morbid introspection. Death was no abstraction, it stalked collar wards and factory floors, claiming 1 in 4 children before age 5. In this crucible of loss, photography, born in 1839 with daggers silvered plates, became both salve and spectre. Consider the medium's infancy. Early portraits demanded immobility, exposures stretched minutes, sitters braced with head clamps resembling medieval tortures, expressions frozen in rictus grins. Yet by the 1870s, collodion wet plates and dry gelatin processes hastened the art, democratizing the lens. Studios proliferated in every borough, from Mayfair's gilt salons to Whitechapel's grimy nooks. Prices plummeted, 6p for a carte D visit, pocket-sized calling cards that swept the land like a fad for facial fossils. Families amassed albums thick as Bibles, shuffling the dead among the living, as if curation could cheat the grave. But it was post-mortem photography that truly haunted the age, transforming bereavement into visual liturgy. The practice burgeoned post-1840, peaking in the 1860s-80s. Bereaved posed with cadavers, infants cradled like sleeping cherubs, elders propped in armchairs with eyes propped open by wires, cheeks rouged to mimic vitality. Manuals abounded. The post-mortem portrait, 1872, advised belladonna drops for pupil dilation, cotton in nostrils for natural contours. Studios like Southworth and Hawes in Boston churned out thousands, exporting to Europe where, in London's Baker Street, firms like Fradell & Young specialized in memento mori, tableaux. These were no mere snapshots, they were rituals, blending Christian resurrection hopes with pagan ancestor worship. A mother might embrace her drowned child's sodden form, waves painted on the backdrop, a widower clasp his spouse's hand, rings glinting like talismans. The illusion of life was paramount, vignetting to fade unnatural stiffness, floral tributes to soften the pallor. Yet unease simmered. Critics decried it as ghoulish vanity, while proponents hailed it as eternal embrace. Elias Whitaker's impulse echoes this tradition, but the Whitaker Illusion veers into the era's darker byways, trick photography, that playful yet profane manipulation of light. The 1870s-90s saw a headless portrait fad, pioneered by innovators like Henry Peach Robinson and Oscar Gustav Ridgelander, masters of composite printing. Ridgelander's 1858, The Two Ways of Life, a moral allegory stitched from 30 negatives, proved images could deceive as deftly as any stage illusion. Amateurs aped them with double exposure as sitters ducking from frame, heads reinserted via lantern, slide projectors, creating decapitations that titillated drawing rooms. The Strand magazine's 1891 featured headless ladies, women posing with gowns atop plinths, necks vanishing into ether. Men cradled their own severed noggins like hunting trophies, smiles defiant against the macabre. This wasn't mere whimsy. It tapped Victorian decapitation obsessions, echoes of the guillotine's French legacy, public hangings at Newgate where crowds picnicked on horror. The head, symbol of reason, severed became chaos incarnate, a Freudian precursor to the subconscious's eruption. Folklore amplified the eeriness. Celtic bards sang of Malach, headless wraiths seeking reattachment, and English broadsheets peddled tales of blemmies, acephalous monsters from medieval bestiaries. Spiritualism exploding post-1848 Fox Sisters wrappings, fused with photography in Spirit Images. William Mumler, Boston's 1860s medium photographer, captured extras, ghostly overlays on sitters, including Abraham Lincoln posing with his late son. Fraud or phenomenon. Courts convicted Mumler of deceit in 1869, yet believers flocked. In England, Frederick Hudson and Edouard Isidore Bouguet peddled ectoplasmic orbs and materialized forms, their darkrooms alchemical lairs where cyanide baths birthed apparitions. By 1880, the Society for Psychical Research probed such claims, blending empiricism with esoterica. Sir William Crookes photographing Katie King, a spirit with luminous flesh, his credulity a scandal among peers. Elias's tale weaves these threads: the post-mortem's grief-soaked piety, trickery's mischievous blade, spiritualism's siren call. Blackfriars Road, his haunt, was a microcosm, proximity to the Thames, that liquid grave, swallowing suicides weekly. Bred fatalism. Highgate Cemetery, his daughter's rest, was a Gothic wonderland. Egyptian Avenue's catacombs, Rossetti's exhumation for a manuscript in 1862 fueling resurrection myths. Clockmaking too resonated culturally, timepieces as memento mori, their inexorable march mocking human frailty. Firms like Waterbury produced morning watches with black dials, while inventors tinkered with eternal mechanisms, perpetual motion dreams that paralleled the era's immortality quests. Yet authenticity's unease lingers. Was the Whitaker illusion real? Archival traces are scant. No Grimshaw in Drury Lane directories, no Whitaker obit in the Times, but echoes abound. A 1882 photographic news article on severed head composites for theatrical posters, an 1879 South Kensington exhibition of morbid manipulations, drawing crowds and censors. Folklore scholars cite head portraits in Cornish smuggler's lore, where decapitated revenants guarded hoards. Blended, they forge unsettling verisimilitude, facts scaffold draped in legend's shroud. This context chills because it reveals our ancestors' mirror. Victorians, corseted in propriety, unleashed eyed through the lens. They posed the unspeakable to domesticate it, severing heads to reclaim control. In Elias we see everyman, grief's alchemist transmuting loss to monstrosity. The camera that, truthful witness, lied beautifully, inviting us to question what illusions do we craft today in pixels and filters to bind the departed. The throne of nightmares whispers, all, beneath the Whitaker illusion's visceral horror, that decapitated innocence cradled in paternal grasp, lies a labyrinth of symbolism, a psychological palimpsest where Victorian restraint fractures into primal dread. Elias Whitaker is no mere madman. He embodies the human psyche's desperate architecture, erecting illusions to buttress the ego against annihilation's gale. At its core, this tale interrogates grief not as linear descent, but as recursive spiral, loss begetting creation, creation curdling to corruption. The severed head, grotesque synecdoche, symbolizes fragmentation, the self riven by bereavement, rational mind detached from visceral longing. In Freudian terms, although interpretation of dreams postdates 1880, its shadows loom. It evokes castration anxiety transposed, the father's cut, not phallic but existential, severing the child from life's continuum, leaving him emasculated by solitude. Symbolically, the portrait functions as Lacanian mirror, stage gone array. The camera, that unblinking other, promises wholeness. Elias gazes upon the image, seeing not absence but reunion. Yet the illusion shatters, literally, in the narrative's climax, revealing the imaginary's fragility. Clara's head, isolated, becomes object petita, the unattainable kernel of desire, forever proximate yet severed. Her eyes, staring through him, enact the gazy, not passive witness, but accusatory judgment, inverting power. Father as protector devolves to perpetrator. The trick exposes the violence inherent in memorialization, petrifying the beloved into icon, denying her autonomy in death. Thematically, paternal love's perversion threads universal fears. Elias's obsession mirrors mythic archetypes, Cronus devouring progeny to forestall overthrow, Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac, faith's blade stayed by divine whim. Here, no angel intervenes. The cut is self-inflicted, grief's scalpel excising the child's agency to preserve the father's illusion of control. Culturally, it echoes Victorian paternalism, women and children as chattel, their narratives appended to male arcs. Clara's cough, that consumptive spectre, symbolizes societal illness. Industrial England's toll on the innocent, pollution-choking tender lungs as patriarchy smothers spirits. Her head, proffered like a Renaissance Vanatus, warns of hubris, man's grasp exceeding divine apportionment. Psychologically, the tale delves trauma's alchemy. Grief, per Kubler-Ross's stages later formalized, manifests in Elias as denial as the portrait's commissioning, bargaining les séances, depression, isolation, anger the smashing, yet resolution eludes, acceptance fractures into psychosis, the illusion metastasizing, Jungian shadows emerge, Clara's ghost, as anima projection, Elias's unintegrated feminine, nurturing denied by Elisa's death, displaced onto the daughter. The headless form evokes the pure eternal child severed from maturation, trapping both in liminal stasis. Universal fears coalesce, fear of obsolescence, the aging father's dread of irrelevance, filicide's taboo, emotional murder via fixation. The uncanny, Freud's unheimlich, where familiar severs paternal bond, turns fremd grotesque relic. Connecting to cultural trauma, the narrative indicts empire's underbelly. 1880 Gladstone's Midlothian campaign rails against Disraeli's jingoism. Yet the Congo's rubber horrors, foreshadowed in search echoes lurk, hands severed for quotas mirroring Clara's head, colonial violence as domestic metaphor. Spiritualism, too, as Borges' escapism from class strife, working class Elias seeks transcendence amid enclosures fallout, the lens democratizing the divine, yet commodifying the dead. Gendered trauma amplifies father-daughter dyad subverts Oedipal norms, incestuous undertones in the cradling, love's eros twisting thanatos. Human nature's duality shines ominous creativity as destruction's twin. Elias, artisan of time, forges eternity's counterfeit, echoing Goethe's forced bargain with the abyss birthing monstrosity. Intellectually, it probes epistemology, photography's indexical truth, per Roland Barthes' camera lucidad belied by manipulation, prefiguring digital deepfakes. What is real when grief authors reality? The tale posits no answers, only echoes, lingering questions that haunt like the portrait's gaze. In this intellectual gloom, we confront our shadows. Do we not all commission illusions, social media memorials, AI recreations? To defy decay, Elias's throne is ours, the nightmare, collective. Sit, stare, the head watches back, and so the fog lifts, but not entirely, from the Whitaker Illusion, that sepia spectre of 1880, where a father's love, pure as clockwork spring, coiled into something inexorable, unbreakable, undead. We leave Elias Whitaker on that fog-bound steamer, the Atlantic's vasty maw swallowing his silhouette, the locket's sliver glinting like a malevolent eye. Did he find peace in New York's clamor, gears of progress grinding his ghosts to dust? Or did the ticking follow, a siren's lure drawing him to some Bowery garret, where the portrait, smuggled, salvaged, hung eternal, her head whispering indictments through the walls? History, that selective archivist, offers no ledger, only the image endures, passed hand to hand through shadowed auctions, its aura tainting owners with restless nights and phantom chimes. Reflect, wanderers, on the throne's cruel jest in seeking to hold the departed, we sever ourselves. Elias cradled not Clara, but his reflection, grief's doppelganger, smiling through severed lips. The illusion's genius lies in its ambiguity, murder of memory, spiritual bridge, or the psyche's scream manifesting the unspoken horror that love unchecked devours. Highgate's cherub stones weather silent, Blackfriars' workshops echo with long-soled hammers, yet the question lingers, a hook in the soul. What fragments do we cradle, unknowing, in our own laps, whose eyes stare back from our mirrors, wide with unspoken accusation? As the gas lamps dim and Big Ben tolls oblivion's hour, let this tale coil in your marrow. Sleep lightly, wind your watches tight, for in the quiet you may hear it, a child's laugh, a father's sigh, the snap of an unseen thread. The veil thins, the nightmare waits. Until next we descend, I am your keeper. Good eve.